Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're talking a little bit about Chapter 9, Part 2, Finishes and Furniture Selection. And so we're going to be discussing a little bit more in depth. We've kind of started a little bit on things, so hopefully you can see the interior table that I've got going here so that we'll be able to review it and go over everything on here. So let's get started. Okay, this is probably, as I said, Chapter 9 is probably one of the most important chapters that you will utilize. So you're going to have to really read in the IBC code book, and you're going to have to read in your textbook, and you're going to have to really go back and forth to understand. But it's not hard, so don't make it complicated, don't make it hard. But one of the things that we want to do, especially learning a little bit about finishes, is making sure as an interior designer that we specify the appropriate and correct finish that goes with that application. So you're going to see that it's organized like to include wall and ceiling finishes, floor finishes, and decorations and trims. And you're going to see that in Chapter 8 in the IBC code book, if you look on Chapter 8 in the book, page 197, that's where this particular chapter starts. It talks a little bit about here of how you have the different classifications. So when we talk about interior wall and finish materials, you're going to see that you're going to have to look at like class A, B, and C to see how things are working in through here. Now, the requirements of the table, if you look or turn the page, it says interior wall and ceiling finishes. You've got to know if it's the appropriate one or which one is best for that particular classification and where it will be located. So it's really important that you look at this. So a lot of times it's going to give us our group. Well, remember, this is our classification, which is the first aisle that you hear. And it says interior exit stairways, interior exit ramps, and exit passageways. So it's telling you, of course, what you can have, what classification, either A, B, or C, that it has to be those particular finishes on the wall and ceiling, because that's what we're talking about here, can be located. Quarters and enclosed for exit access stairways and exit access ramps. Then it's giving you, of course, what we can have here, B, C, A. But remember, if they have a little number, J, you've got to look down below and read what it says. So open up your book and look at it. It says Class B material should be permitted as wainscoting extending not more than 48 inches above the finished floor in quarters and exit access stairways and ramps. So you've got to make sure you're following the code. Then it has rooms and enclosed spaces. So those are other rooms that you may have. All of this section, this first section, of course, is sprinkled. This second section right here says non-sprinkled. So you've got to make sure that you know what the building is. So kind of look at that. We're going to be going back over that again, but I want you to understand it depends on what type of finish and where is it being applied. So first, remember, you're going to find out what group it's in, business, assembly, what. Then you're going to look if it's sprinkled or non-sprinkled. Then you're going to go if it's an exit, okay, or if it is that passageway, your quarters enclosed for exit access stairways, getting to those exits, okay, and then rooms enclosed and other spaces. So that's the three things that you're really looking for at this point. Okay, the tables, depending on your jurisdiction, sometimes you have to compare to what the IBC and the life safety code is. So one of the things I always want you to do is let's go back to your textbook because it gives you some really good things here that you need to look at. Now, in reading the chapter, you're going to learn a lot about the different standards. The standards, of course, are testing things, and they've got requirements on different materials, and they're standardizing what they are. Read and know what the NFPA 253 is. Okay, standard method of test for critical radiant flux or floor covering system using radiant heat energy source. So that kind of goes to your radiant panel test. I've kind of, I go through and make sure that I know which test method goes to what. Okay, the NFPA 260. So you're going to go through all of these, and you're going to determine which ones those are. So make sure that you do that so that you can go through and understand that. Standards and testing. Those are codes, reference standards, instead of listing them. You're going to see on page 427 of your textbook here. Let me get to 427. I want you to kind of look at that. And get the page turned here. This, of course, is talking about your common test. Remember, we just went over these. So these are the test methods, and these are the standard names. So when we go through all these tests, you're going to see that these are standard names that go with the tests that are there. We have testing like the Steiner tunnel test, the radiant panel test, the room corner test, and so there's a handout that I put in the course, so you might want to print it out and look at it, and we're going to be going over that a little bit later. So when we talk about the Steiner tunnel test, it's a test to determine both the flame spread and the smoke to development ratings, because remember we said that the number one killer of a lot of fires is smoke and inhaling the smoke. So we want to make sure that we've got to look at both of these things, not just the spread or flame spread, but the smoke. So some same tests used by the ASTM, the NFPA, and the UL standard organizations are under their names. So when we said the Steiner tunnel test, remember it says the ASTM E84, and so that's the standard test method for surface burning characteristics of building materials. And it gives us here UL 723, which is the test for surface burning characteristics of building materials. And they utilize the NFPA 255, which is the standard method test of surface burning characteristics of building materials. So wall covering tests are tested on their materials, chipboard with adhesive recommended by manufacturers. So a lot of times you're going to see this acronym of FSI. That means Flame Spread Index. Time it takes the flame to travel down the length of the tunnel, and it's measured. Okay, so if it passes this, it's going to be, of course, either a class A, B, or C rating. Okay, so this is kind of what the test looks like. They put the material down in through here, and you can see, of course, in this whole test, how fast does it burn down this particular area. So you can see it takes a little bit of time to go through to do this and put it in place. There's lots of YouTube videos if you want to go back through and look to kind of understanding to see how it's rated. All right, next you have the radiant panel test. Used to rate interior finishes such as carpet, resilient flooring, and hardwood floor assemblies. It was originally created by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is the NIST, and NBS RSS 75-9050 currently, of course, does this particular test. So if we're looking at the radiant panel test, it talks about the NFPA 253, which is a standard method of test for critical radiant flux of floor covering systems using a radiant heat energy source. And then it has the ASTM E648, which is standard test method for critical radiant flux of floor covering systems, use a radiant heat energy source. So what we're trying to do on this, remember we just talked about A, B, and C, but when we're talking about flooring, you want to look at the critical radiant flux. So our floorings are either going to be a class 1, minimum of 0.45 watts per square centimeter, or a class 2, minimum of 0.22 watts per square centimeter. So this is a radiant panel test. It's not a very good picture, but it kind of shows you a little bit of how it goes through and looks. Then you have what is referred to as your peel test. In addition to the radiant panel test, carpets and certain rug manufacturers for the sale in the United States have been required since 1971 to meet these federal flammability standards. They use a methamine tablet or a peel that sits in the middle to ignite the sample during the test. The ignite or the peel, once the flame or glow has gone out, it measures the distance the carpet has burned beyond the original ignition point, which is measured and recorded. It is just really a pass-fail test. Now, you're going to see in here the peel test. It has 16 CFR 1630, which is also DOC FF1-70, and you're going to see, of course, the 16 CFR 1631 DOC FF2-70, and the ASTM D2859. Now, you're saying, how am I going to remember all these numbers? And you're not, but you're going to have to go back and keep these particular tables so that you can kind of find out which ones they have passed, if it's a pass-fail, and if it has these numbers on it. So you'll know, of course, then we're looking at carpets and rugs. If it is looked at this particular test, that would be the peel test. So you can see here, this is kind of an example in the PowerPoint. You have the center, they start the flame, and how far does it measure out? And you can't get past, of course, the circle that's there. Okay, next you have the vertical flame test. In here it's required for all vertical treatments such as curtains, draperies, window shades, large wall hangings, tapestries, plastic films used for decorative purposes. Any vertical finish that is exposed to air on both sides, because normally you can attach it to the wall, but it's not adhered to the wall, is considered a vertical treatment. So your vertical flame test would be like the NFPA 701 and the ASTM 64313. So these are vertical tests for flame resistance of textiles. And then I've added the UL 214 test for flame propagation of fabrics and films. So there's a test method 1, which is small scale test, is required for lighter weight fabrics like single layered or multi-layered. They must be self-extinguished within 2 seconds and cannot lose more than 40% of its original weight. Then test method 2 is a large-scale test for heavier fabrics and fabrics that have vinyl coatings such as blackout blinds and lined drapes. Use a vinyl-coated blackout lining. Large drapery assemblies. Now, you know, a lot of times you may stay in a hotel that has both types of treatment that are in place. Then you'll see the room corner test. Okay, that's a standard test, must be used when napped. Tufted or looped textiles is used as wall coverings on walls and ceilings. A lot of times you're going to see something they want to have a little bit more elaborate, and so you've got to have certain tests that it has to pass. There's 2 versions of this test: textile wall coverings and then non-textiles, which would be like vinyl wall covering. It means the entire room used in these tests and the flame sources is located in one of the corners of the room. As I said, there are 2 versions of the test. So in through here, you have the NFPA 265, Standard method of fire test for evaluating room fire growth contributing of textile coverings or full height panels and wall. And then you have the UL 1750, which is a fire test of interior finish materials. And it is a pass-fail test. This is what a room corner test. They put it, of course, and then you can see the scale on the left-hand corner in the pictures there, and it's measuring how far it goes out at different heights. Next, you have a smolder resistance test. It's known as a cigarette ignition test. Consists of putting the lighted cigarette on a sample and then covering it with a layer of sheeting materials. Once the cigarette burns its full length, the char length is measured in all directions. It is a pass-fail test, and so individuals or finishes or textiles, it's kind of the NFPA 260 methods of test and classification for cigarette ignition resistance of components of upholstered furniture. And then you have the ASTM E1353 resistive components of upholstered furniture. And then the CAL 117. Well, in here it also has the CAL 116, which is a test procedure and apparatus for testing the flame retardants of upholstered furniture. So what the difference is the CAL 116 is very similar, but the 117 is a total mock-up of that particular furniture. So you can see, of course, going down through here, you've got to be able to know what these are. Mattress tests, commercial applications, or all applications. You've got to know. So specifies finish classes for interior floor coverings, class 1 and 2, and in addition to classes A, B, and C, and interior floor coverings, class 1 and 2. Interior wall and ceilings are class A, B, and C. Now, they're divided into the occupancy classification in new and existing buildings. So the first thing you've got to know is know your occupancy. Table the list of finishes classes in each area. And so you've got to know if it's an exit, access to exit, or other room. So we're kind of going back to this particular one. You've got to know where it's located, where these materials, where the finishes are located. And some occupancies have a symbol or footnote following the recorded class. Note, automatic sprinklers can change the finish classification. So we have an educational space in existing. We have class A wall and ceiling finishes used in all exit areas. Okay, class A and B allowed in access area. So if we're looking at educational, you've got to go back and look at here. So you've got to look where B, C, and C, if it's sprinkled, where it would be, or non-sprinkled, it would have to be an A, or B, or C. So you've got to follow that to be able to understand. Schools sometimes have mixed occupancies because of gymnasium, auditoriums, or cafeterias. So notice the table does not indicate a floor finish for either occupancy 1 or 2. So it's not telling us in here what our floor finishes are. So how do we go about trying to figure that out? Those are things that we need to kind of look at. Because remember, back in here, back in your textbook, you will see in your life safety code book, this is where it's kind of going to look at it. So look at page 452, because it's going to give you a breakdown from assembly. And if I can get it just a little closer so you can make sure you read this. Okay. You have assembly. It's got new, less than 300, greater than 300, or equal to. Assembly existing, less than 300, greater than 300, and less than 300. And then it has educational, new, and existing. So if we're looking at it here, exits, of course, A, exit access, A and B, and then A, B, and C. Okay? So it doesn't say anything existing here of floor covering, but we get in new. It says new exits have to be 1 or 2. Okay, that would be your floor covering. Exit access 1 or 2. And then other spaces in A. So when you're looking at this, you just got to have to go through and make sure that you look in the Life Safety Code book, which this table is. So you need to be able to print this page so that you'll have it when you do your worksheet. Okay, test results. Remember the CAL 133 and the FPA 701 strictly pass-fail. Steiner tunnel test and radiant panel assigned ratings to testing, and manufacturers supply you with a letter or number rating. You can always ask them, what is your rating? Tell me if it's A, B, C, or a 1 and 2. They know their products, and before putting them on the market, they go and see what market they're after. So I hope this helps you to kind of understand a little bit.